The Center for Educational Media and the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University are proud to offer professional development to K-12 educators in Tennessee through our online video library. These videos are aligned with standards set by the Tennessee Department of Education. For more professional development videos, check out our website at cem.mtsu.edu.
Welcome to the Center for Educational Media at MTSU's College of Education. This is the SPED Collaborative coming from CEM's program known as the PK-12 Collaborative. So today we are so happy to have Ms. Kim Singh from Rutherford County Schools. She is Special Education Instructional Technology Specialist for the district at Rutherford County Schools. So Ms. Singh, so happy to have you here today, so please take the floor.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. Good morning to everybody. Today I'm coming to talk to you about a very important topic, something I'm very passionate about, and that's tech tools for inclusive education and universal design for learning. UDL may not be something that you're familiar with. It is I won't say newer concept, but especially when it comes to technology. As technology has grown, we've found that there's a need for tools to make sure that our technology is inclusive for our SPED students as well. And so let's take a look at this. My session objectives, I'm going to cover three things today. I want to be sure that teachers are familiar with what UDL is, Universal Design for Learning, the principles and the significance of that. To familiarize teachers with universal tools that will implement UDL principles in the classroom, and also to examine some AI tools that can help assist teachers when making UDL something that you can actually put into practice in your classroom. And so first of all, let's talk a little bit about UDL. What is Universal Design for Learning? Universal design in general actually started many years ago. It started with a group of people with disabilities who were in wheelchairs, and they were fighting for equal access on the city streets, really. Universal design started out because they wanted the cutouts in the sidewalks, because when you're in a wheelchair, that's something that's necessary for you to be able to get around the city. And as they were working on this and trying to get the politicians and the governments to make this something that they could do, they realized they weren't the only ones who would benefit from the cutouts on the sidewalks. You have mothers with strollers, you have older people who have their walkers, or even just older people who are kind of mobility, you know, they have to step down off the sidewalk. And so they realized this tool that they needed in their wheelchairs is actually something that could benefit more people, and that's why it became a universal design. And so that started then, and as time went on and we hit the technology age, and we begin to see more and more technology, well, there's a need for universal design and technology too, because people with disabilities, there are certain things they need to be able to access the technology. And that comes into education, of course. And so this is where UDL comes in. The definition is that it's an educational framework that aims to cater to the diverse learning needs of all students by providing flexible instruction methods, materials, and assessments. And so as we start to work in universal design and we start to put up some technology assignments and things that our students need to access digitally, we have to make sure that they can access those, and by making it so that they can actually get to it. So this is a quick video that kind of gives a really good analogy of what UDL looks like in education.
Why don't we go bowling? So let's talk about bowling. You have 10 pins, you have 2 balls, and you have a lane. The goal is to knock down as many pins as you can. But if you don't get them all, it's okay because you have another chance. But when I bowl and roll the ball down the middle and I don't knock them all down, What often ends up happening to me is that there's 2 pins left standing on either end, and they stare at you. It's the 7-10 split, and it's the hardest shot in bowling. How is bowling like teaching? The ball was the lesson, the pins are the kids. We aim for the middle, we do the best we can. The pins that are left standing, we often have another chance to kind of get to them, but at the end of the day, those 2 pins that are staring, looking at you, are kids who need the most support and are kids who need the most challenge. So we end up choosing one, and the other one is left standing. I just took all the fun out of bowling. Now, I don't know how many times you've watched professional bowling, but I spent an afternoon watching professional bowling, and let me tell you, there was not one bowler who rolled that ball down the middle of the lane. They throw the ball down the lane at a curve. And I was actually really curious about this, so I called up a professional bowler. He was so excited. I don't think he gets a lot of calls about education. He said the reason why the ball has to enter at a curve is because you will knock down more pins and create a bigger domino effect if you enter at that angle. But in order to do that, you have to change your aim. In order to knock down the most pins with one shot, he aims for the pins that are the hardest to hit. Now let's just let this sink in for a second. We are taught to teach the head pins. We are not taught to teach to the kids who are the furthest and the hardest to get to, the kids with autism, the kids with Down syndrome. The part that's critical here, and it really aligns with Universal Design for Learning, is that so often the supports that we design for those kids on the outside of the lane are actually supports that all of the kids need. This is the part we need to understand if inclusive education is going to move forward in Canada. How can we find this value of diversity in our classrooms between the students? This is not just important for the outside pins, but it's critical for every single one of us. And just think, all we need to do is change our aim. Look how bowling changed education.
What we really need to do is change our aim. And this, when I watched that, I just love that video because to me, it's a really good analogy. Because when we do teach our lessons, when we plan our lessons, and I was in the classroom for 15 years, and when you make lesson plans, you think generally, this is what I'm gonna do for my students. And I experienced this. I would think, okay, after the fact, I'd plan my lesson, but wait, I know I've got these students who are gonna need copies of the notes, and I've got some SPED students who have read aloud accommodations, so I'm gonna have to do that for them, but it was an afterthought. But with Universal Design for Learning, it's really a paradigm shift. If you think about how we educate our students, if we planned our lessons with the students who are the hardest to reach in mind, then it's gonna hit all of our students, just like that analogy. If we plan to hit the pins that are the hardest to hit, everybody, it will create a domino effect. And so that's really the crux of Universal Design for Learning. There are 3 guiding principles to UDL. Multiple means of engagement, and that's engaging our students. Students are motivated by different things. If you've taught any amount of time, you know this. Some students are motivated by grades. Some students are motivated by relevance. How am I ever going to use this? And some students are motivated by other things. Sometimes we give them candy, and that's the motivation. So multiple means of engagement. When we plan our lessons, we need to plan to engage them in different ways. Multiple means of representation, different learning styles. Some students are auditory learners. My son can sit in a classroom and listen to the teacher lecture and never take a note, but it sinks in. I don't learn that way. I'm a very visual learner. I like to have a PowerPoint or a set of guided notes, or I highlight things when I study. So planning your lessons with different learning styles in mind. Sometimes you have to teach it in multiple ways to hit every student in your classroom. And finally, multiple means of action and expression. How do we assess our students? Students have different strengths. Some students are great writers. I taught high school English. Some students, I could give them an essay question and they would ace it every time. Some students are not great writers. Some students are very creative. What if I also ask them, instead of writing an essay, you can write song lyrics to demonstrate that you learned the lesson. Maybe you like to do multimedia presentations. Maybe you want to make a PowerPoint to show me that you learned the lesson. Different students have different strengths, and we need to assess them differently. So those are the 3 guiding principles of UDL. a very valuable resource if you really want to dig deep into universal design for learning and to make it practical. Because right now in your head, it's kind of nebulous and it's a theory and you're like, that sounds great, but how do I do it? And this is where you can learn that. CAST.org is a wonderful organization that has come up with these guidelines for universal design for learning. And you can go to CAST.org and find the background of universal design. It gives you the history of the kind of how it has all evolved over the years. And you can also see these wonderful guidelines. This is a clickable chart when you go to this website. And so you see the 3 categories at the top: engagement, representation, and action and expression. And then it breaks it down even further. So for example, let's look at action and expression. It's broken down into interaction, expression and communication, and strategy development. And I could click on each one of those. Under interaction, there are 2 different objectives: vary and honor the methods for response, navigation, and movement; optimize access to accessible materials and assistive and accessible technologies and tools. If I click on that, it breaks it down into action items. How does that look in my classroom? What does it mean to optimize access to accessible materials and assistive and accessible technologies and tools? Again, that sounds very nebulous, but this breaks it down and tells you exactly what that means in your classroom. If you're going to put items online, if you're going to have a learning management system, how does that look? How do you make sure that students who need read aloud get read aloud? Those are the actionable items that you can learn from these guidelines. So what are the benefits of UDL? And I'm going to talk for a minute about this graphic because it really is one of my favorite graphics. We have students in our classrooms from all walks of life. We have students, like let's look at the reality over here, students who have every benefit. They have supportive parents. They have enough money to hire tutors if they need tutors. They come to school fed and clothed and happy and healthy. And then we've got our students who we can kind of consider our average students who have, a family intact and they have everything they need. But then we have students who come to us who have so many needs. Maybe they only have one parent at home. Maybe they live with their grandparents. Maybe they live in a foster home. Maybe they don't have somebody at home who can help them with their homework when they go home. Maybe they're hungry. Maybe they didn't sleep last night because they had to take care of their baby brother or baby sister. And so they come to us with a deficit. The question is, how do we make sure that both students on both ends of the spectrum get what they need in order to learn? And that's where UDL comes in. And you can kind of see the ideas. If we give them all equality, and we talk a lot about equality, but if we give them equality, that's still not enough for that student who came with a deficit. If we give them equity, then we give them everything that they need to have access. The goal of UDL, though, is to remove the barrier completely. If we can remove the barrier completely, all students have equal and equitable access. So the benefits, of course, inclusivity. It ensures that all those students, regardless of their abilities, can participate in the learning process. If we have English language learners, how do we make sure that they can participate in the learning process? If we're having a discussion in class, how do we make sure they have access to the content so they can discuss it? Personalization. Again, all students have diverse strengths and needs, making sure that we meet the needs of all those students, whether they need read aloud, maybe they need speech to text, they have issues with writing, so how do we make sure that they have access to that? Also, as far as diverse strengths, when you're talking about assessing students, can't we give them a way of assessment that plays to their strengths? Can we ask them, how would you like to show me that you've learned this? You want to tell me about it? Do you want to draw a picture that can demonstrate that? Do you want to write about it? How do you want to show me that you've learned? And then equity. Again, promoting equity by removing those barriers and making sure that we have an accessible learning environment for all students. So that is kind of the background, and there's so much more to learn about UDL. If you're interested in it, I really suggest you go to cast.org and read up on it. Learn more. There are some great books out there that you can buy that will show you how to do universal design in your classroom, and it's so important that we make sure our students have access to the content. So taking a step away from universal design, well, not really, but let's look at the technology part of this. As we've moved toward a more digital world and our classrooms are becoming more digital places, it's easy to think when you're used to read aloud. When I was in the classroom, read aloud for a student meant that I had to have an EA come to my class and remove that student and read the test aloud to them. Or I had to have an audio book when we would read books in class. So now, with the rise of technology, and I know in Rutherford County and many other districts, we now have laptops. The students in our high schools, it's 1-to-1. All of the students in our high schools have a laptop. And then all of the students in middle and elementary have access to a laptop in the classroom. We have to think about, how do we make that accessible? When it's on a computer, what does accessibility look like? And so I'm going to show you some tools for some accommodations. And here's the thing about it. All of these tools, even though they were created with students with disabilities in mind, can be used by anybody. The same way that read aloud text on our phones, reading the text aloud, that was really an accommodation. That's an accessibility tool for people with vision issues. I use it all the time. I listen to audiobooks all the time. I turn on closed captioning on my TV all the time. I don't have hearing disabilities, but it's something that I use. And so all of these tools, a lot of them we use every day. Talking to Siri, talking to Alexa, those really started as accessibility tools, but they're universal tools because we can all use them and benefit from them. So when I talk about these tools from the vantage point of these are accommodation tools, accessibility tools, think about how other students without disabilities can use them as well. These are tools that we really need to talk to our general education teachers about as well. A lot of our SPED teachers know about these tools, but it's the students who are in our inclusion classrooms that really need access to these tools. And so we have to make sure our gen ed teachers also know about these. So when they're posting assignments in their learning management systems, they know that they need to set them up with this in mind. So if a student has a read aloud accommodation, like I said, when I was in the classroom, it's been a while. When I was in the classroom, not every student had a laptop. And so we would have to send the student out to be read aloud to by someone. But now we've got all these tools. If you are a Microsoft district, there is Microsoft Immersive Reader. I think somebody told me that now in Google you can actually download an extension in Chrome that has Immersive Reader. It is by far the best accessibility tool that our students have, at least in our district. It does more than just read aloud. So we open a document in Immersive Reader. It can read aloud to the student, of course. They can change the voices, they can change the speed. That's a general read aloud tool. Not only does it do that though, when you open a document in Immersive Reader, you can also adjust the size of the text. I can adjust the font of the text. I can put a filter on it. So for our students who are dyslexic, and for our students who may have vision issues, they can put that color filter on there. My background is not in special education, but I've learned a lot since I've been in this position. And the teachers tell me that before we had the technology, we had color overlays, transparencies. You would lay down on top of the document so that it would change the background color, and that really helps our dyslexic students. So it has all of those text options in there. You can also use line focus, which is basically masking, and it follows if you're using the read aloud for our students who have tracking issues when they're learning to read. And I taught high school, and I know I would still have students using their finger to track. And so the line focus in Immersive Reader would help them to track as they're reading aloud or reading to themselves. Also an immersive reader. It has a ability to translate the text. In the preferences, you can turn the translate on and translate the whole page, and then it will read it aloud in the language you translate to. Or you can turn off the page translation and turn on word translation. So as we have our students who are English language learners coming into our classrooms, as they become more independent, we turn off the page translation. We leave on the word translation. If they come across a word they don't know, they click on it. It shows them the word in their native language, and they can press a button to have it read aloud to them in their native language. Not only that, Immersive Reader is full of fun surprises. It also has a picture dictionary, and so if you turn on the picture dictionary when you click on a word, if it's a word that has a picture associated with it, it'll pop up the picture. And so the students get a visual. So important for our students with disabilities and for our ELL students, but also important for struggling readers. So even if they're not a student with a disability, if they come across a word they don't know, they can click it and have that access. So let's talk about the universal design part of this. Our students who don't have disabilities, how many times have you let your phone read your text to you? How many times have you had your email read aloud to you? That's a read aloud, that's an accessibility feature. It wasn't created for us, but it's really nice to have. So a lot of these features were created for accessibility, and those students need them. They need them to access the material. But for those of us who don't have disabilities, it's really nice to have. So that's Immersive Reader. The Edge browser in Microsoft also has read aloud. Many of the pages in the Edge browser, because Edge is a Microsoft tool, are actually able to be opened in Immersive Reader as well. So even if you're on a website, when you go up in the URL bar, there's a read aloud function, and you can open it in Immersive Reader, and all that functionality of Immersive Reader is on the web too when you use the Edge browser. Now, if you're not a Microsoft district, Google has add-ins and extensions as well that do the same thing. And so in Google Chrome, you can download the Read Aloud extension, the voice reader, or there's one called text-to-speech. One program that a lot of Google districts use, I know, is called Read and Write, and that's one that does have to be purchased, but it has, it integrates perfectly with Google Sheets and Google Chrome, so that it will build in all of those same features really that Immersive Reader has, but that is a purchased option. So those are read aloud tools, and like I said, Immersive Reader is probably my favorite tool, and it has so much more than just the read aloud. So that is text to speech. What if we have students who need speech to text? They maybe have issues typing, or they can't write, or even think about this. When it comes to universal design, you have a student who broke his arm. He doesn't have any kind of disability, but text to speech to text will actually work for him because he can't type and he can't write. And so we have features for those. In Microsoft, there is the dictate feature built into Microsoft Word. It's also built into Outlook for email. It is built into PowerPoint. And so students who cannot type or cannot write, or if they have written expression disabilities. I had a student in class one time. He was like, I had trouble at the beginning of the year. He was a SPED student, and he had a written expression disability. I was not, like I said, did not have a background in SPED. I did not really understand what that meant, but I knew that when I tried to have him write a paragraph, he just really couldn't do it. He would struggle with that, and I would be good to get one sentence out of him. And so I talked to his SPED teacher, and she said, any writing project, when you have them write, he needs to tell you instead. He needs to come talk to you. And so when I would give a quiz or a test over a piece of literature, I always had, some matching, some multiple choice, but every piece of literature that we wrote would have an essay question, because I want to see their thinking, right? And I need to assess their writing ability, because these students are going to go on to college and they need to be able to write. And so this student, what we learned and what worked for him, he would take the test and turn it in without doing the essay question. And then at the end of class, he knew he would turn it into me instead of putting it in the basket. At the end of class, he would come up to me, he just knew, and I would read the question to him, he would verbally answer, and I would put how many points that he was awarded for that question. That's how we did it then. Now, we have, if I were doing this in a digital setting, I would have Microsoft Dictate. He would open that in Word, and I would have him step out into the hall, and he would just speak his answer into his device, and it would type it for him. Dictate also has the availability to turn off the auto punctuation. So if I want to grade them on capitalization and punctuation and those general standard English rules of writing, I could turn off auto punctuation, have them dictate, and then they would go back and edit. Or they could, if they're unable to do that physically, they could have somebody sit with them and say, you know, you need to capitalize. They would tell them what to capitalize and what to punctuate. So that's in Microsoft. In Google Docs, if you're a Google district, Google Docs has the enable voice typing option, so they can use that. And then for browsers, there's an extension called Voice In that you can add to both the Edge and the Chrome browser. So if a student's needing to type in a browser, for example, learning management system, if you use Canvas or if you use Schoology or any of those other learning management systems, that's on a browser. So you would need to have the option for them to do that. So for our deaf or hard of hearing students, like I said, I use captioning all the time. I turn on, it's not that I'm hard of hearing. I think what it boils down to, I'm a visual person. And I can watch TV and I hear it and I understand it, but I like to watch and read at the same time. I'm the same way with audiobooks. I have trouble listening to an audiobook, but if I have the audiobook and the actual book, I can do both at once. And so for our students, again, I don't need captioning, but it's a really nice thing to have. Microsoft PowerPoint has live captioning that you can turn on. Google Slides has the same thing. So as you present, you turn on captioning and everything that you say appears on the screen. You can choose to have it above the screen, below the screen. It really depends on where your screen is as you're presenting. So that is live. YouTube, of course, you can have captions on in YouTube. And if you are using Windows devices, in the accessibility tools in Windows, you can turn on live captions, or you can use the shortcut, Control Windows L. It turns on captions, and any words that come out of your computer will be automatically captioned. So any sounds, any language that comes from the computer will be captioned there. Now, of course, you've got to remember, the student does have to be able to read for this to be beneficial. And so also in Microsoft PowerPoint and Google Slides, I'm assuming, you can change the language of the captions. So if I have English language learners who can read in their native language, I could have them sitting in my class. I could turn on my PowerPoint captions in Spanish or Arabic or whatever language they speak. And as I speak, the captions are in their own language. Think how powerful that would be for especially our newcomer students who don't understand hardly anything. Think how welcoming that would be to them to go into a classroom and be able to participate and to understand what's being said. Again, they do have to be able to read their native language for that to be beneficial to them. And finally, students with dyslexia. As I was finishing my EDS a couple of years ago, I got my EDS in reading. I also got a dyslexia certification. And I learned a lot about what dyslexia is and what it isn't. And what I really learned, the basic thing you need to know about dyslexia is it presents differently in every student. It is not one thing. It can be many things. But there are some tools that are helpful for dyslexic students. One is the Open Dyslexic Font, which you can download for free. If you just look up Open Dyslexic Font, you can download that for free. Also, what I found about that is I've talked to teachers recently. Some dyslexic students don't like that at all. Some love it and don't want to read in any other font. Some don't. Again, dyslexia looks different in every student. But any font that you use, you should never use a serif font. And what I mean by that and I should have put an example up here, but any font that has the little edges on the letters is called a serif font. You want a sans serif font. This is a sans serif font because the letters are very clean. There are no little extra curly cues or anything like that. For dyslexic students, they cannot read serif font. It makes it very, very difficult for them to read. Also, when you're typing for your students, spacing things out more. Don't use single spacing for students, especially if you know you've got dyslexic students. I'll be honest, I'm not dyslexic, but I prefer things that are spaced out. It's easier to read, it's not so cramped. So giving them more space between lines, also between letters. That's another thing that Microsoft Immersive Reader does. You can increase the spacing between words and letters. Wide spacing, high contrast settings. Like I said, I talked earlier about the filters that students like. Even students who aren't dyslexic sometimes just like to have a different color instead of always black writing on white paper. There is actually a vision disability called Erland syndrome where those students cannot read. They literally cannot read black text on white paper. But what do we give them? Always black text on white paper. And so those students, what works best for those students is a complete flip, white text on black, which, I mean, I guess you could do that if you want to use up all your printer ink if you were printing it out, but it's really easy to do that with technology. So anything that you give, if you have a student with Erland syndrome, they need white text on black background. And so the high contrast field settings work. And like I said, the line focus and reading tracker, which is available in Immersive Reader, really helps those students to be able to see. Again, not all of these are something that everybody can benefit from. But some of these, and guys, it's not really hard to set this up. This is the idea of universal design, is you do this on the front end. This is not an afterthought. When I plan my lessons, I'm going to make sure that all of them are going to be in a sans serif font. That's easy to do. I'm going to make sure that when I post them somewhere, the students who need it, I can show them how to put a background, a color background on it. The students who want it, I'm going to show the whole class. Because you know what? I may be in class one day and I'm like, I think I want to read on a blue background today. And it's not going to hurt the other students to have the same options as our students who need it. Again, they need it, but for the rest of us, it's nice to have. They don't have to use it, but it's there if they want to. And that's what universal design is all about. So creating your lessons with these things in mind. If I've got a YouTube video, I'm always going to turn on the captions. If I'm doing a PowerPoint for a class of students, I'm always going to turn on the captions because it doesn't hurt anybody. And there are students who have to have that to learn. So we've talked about SPED students and special education students. Some of our SPED students are also ELL students, and there are accessibility tools for them as well. I do want to kind of caution you on this. With students who are ELL students, you do want to check with their ELL teacher because we don't want to give students a crutch that they don't need, because the goal with our EL students is we do want them to be able to learn English, and we do want them to be able to communicate in English. So I would always kind of go hand in hand with that teacher, make sure what's appropriate for those students, because again, we don't want to give them a crutch they don't need, but we do want to make sure that they have access to the content. I think about this often. I like to travel, I go to different countries. I try to think about if I went to a different country and I sat in a classroom and I didn't understand one word that the teacher said, how isolating that would feel. How would it feel if that teacher put up the translation so I could read in my own language? Think about the feeling of that for the students, that they can actually participate in the learning that's going on in the class. And so here are some tools for that. Translation in Microsoft Word and Google Docs. Any document program that you use is going to have a translation tool. Is it always perfect? No, it's not always perfect. Because as we know in English, we have some words that have dual meanings. It's the same in other languages. So it's not always perfect, but it is there in Microsoft Word and Google Docs. PowerPoint also has that translation feature that you can translate slides or you can translate the whole PowerPoint into another language. I often think of that when teachers are doing open house and they have their parents come. They can have the PowerPoint there, and then when they email it home, imagine being the parent who, you maybe speak a little bit of English, but maybe you speak Spanish at home and that's really your native language. Imagine how that would feel to get an email from the teacher and they sent you the same PowerPoint, but it's in your native language. How it feels to be partnering with that teacher. It really feels like they care about your child and they care about you. And so you can translate your PowerPoints. And also, like I said, the captioning with PowerPoint as well. We already talked about Microsoft Immersive Reader. It has translation for read aloud. I think it has like somewhere between 60 and 80 different languages that it will translate into and read aloud to the students. Both Microsoft Edge and Google Chrome have language options in the settings. So if you're in your browser and you go to the 3 dots in the upper right-hand corner, drop down and go into setting, there's always one for translation. And the cool thing about it, at least in Edge, and I think it does the same thing in Chrome, you can choose the language that you speak, and you can set it to any website you go to that is not originally in that language. It'll pop up and ask you if you want to translate it. And so any website I go to, if Spanish is my native language, if it's in English, it'll automatically pop up and say, translate to Spanish, and I hit yes, and it will translate those. That's also very helpful if you, again, universal tools. If you're traveling to another country and you need to make hotel reservations and that hotel website is in Italian, it will translate it for you. And then both Google and Microsoft have translator apps, which I'm sure you've probably seen before. You can put those on your phone. Again, this is good for travel, but also good for talking to parents in your classroom on teacher-parent night. You can put those apps on your phone. You can do it a couple of ways. Both of them have the ability to type in what you want to say and it'll translate it and read it aloud. Or you can speak into it, it'll translate it. They can speak into it, it'll translate. It's a way to have a conversation. Now Microsoft, I don't think Google has this, but Microsoft, you can actually go online to, I think it's translator.microsoft.com. And if you pull it up on a laptop, you can just set it and you have the laptop setting there and you and the parent can go back and forth and it'll keep a running translation going on the website. So those are wonderful tools. Again, they're necessary for our newcomers to be able to get the content, but they're nice to have for us too for communication with parents and others. So we've looked at some of these tools. And we've talked about what UDL is. And AI, of course, is something that is growing. Creating these lessons can be time consuming. If you have decided that you want to change up the way you do things and you want to adopt this paradigm of universal design for learning in your classroom, it can be daunting because it means that you really have to change up the way you've done things. AI can take some of that workload off of you. It cannot do it all for you. It's very important when it comes to artificial intelligence to realize it can do part of the work. Magic School, we're going to look at it in just a moment, will tell you 80-20 rule. Let the AI do 80% of the heavy lifting, but you as the teacher have to do your 20%. AI does not know your students. It does not know their needs. It doesn't know their strengths, and it doesn't know their personalities. And so it can create some great lessons, but I might look at that lesson and think, that might be a little bit too rigorous for this class. Or that would be great for this class, but for this class I'm gonna have to build in some extra scaffolding because they're just not ready for that yet. So AI is a great tool, and we're gonna look at some ways that you can use AI to create UDL lessons. So Magic School, many teachers have dug into Magic School. It does have a free access version that you can use. Every tool that I've got up here right now is on the free version, and you can use it without having to pay. There are, I think, probably over 100 tools now in Magic School. I feel like every time I get on there, there's new tools. I went through and I picked the ones that really kind of feed into the idea of UDL and creating a accessible classroom. And so these are some of those tools. The text translator, of course, for ELL students. Again, with that one, you have to be careful about what they need, what's appropriate for them. And there's actually one that says UDL, the choice board activity. When you are assessing student learning, choice boards are really key to UDL, giving those students options. I used to do a culmination activity with my students after reading To Kill a Mockingbird, which is what we taught in 9th grade for years. And at the end, they had this culmination activity, and I gave them this choice board. And it had written options, it had research options. If you liked history and wanted to do a little research, it had that. If you liked technology, you could make a PowerPoint. You could also make a video if you wanted, or into kind of media like that. I had a option where they could make a newspaper article. They could, well, it wasn't just an article, it had to be a whole newspaper. There was one where they built if you're more kinesthetic, they could build a model. They could draw. I had some of my favorite projects that I did were the drawing, well, I didn't do them, my students did, were the drawing projects I got from that, because I had students who may not be the best students, they may struggle in my class, but I never knew what great artists they were until I gave them this option. They had to draw a picture that symbolized one of the themes that we discussed in reading it. Yes, they still had to stand up in front of the class and show their picture, and they had to explain how it met the theme. They didn't have to write, but if you were an artist, and I would tell the kids, don't do this one if you can't draw. I don't want stick people, but this gave those students a chance to shine. And for me to get to know the students in a way I didn't previously know, and yet they showed me that they understood what we were doing. And all of that was because of a choice board. And I would even tell the students, if you have an idea that you want to do and it's not on my choice board, come talk to me about it. And then a lot of times they would give me ideas that I would then add as an option for my further classes. So choice board in Magic School, you can put in the standard that you're working on, or the name of the book, or whatever skill you're working on, and it will give you a whole list of ways that students can demonstrate their learning. Group work generator for collaborative lessons. I loved group work in my class and collaborative assignments, but I was not very creative. I could not come up with those ideas on my own, and so this would have been great for me to come up with ways to do group work. Real world connections and make it relevant. Those are two different tools. I am not a math person. I taught English for 15 years. Math was not my forte, and I always remember thinking, when am I ever going to use this? And let me be honest, there's a lot of those math tools I still have never, I would not know how to use a polynomial to save my life. But these would help me to come up with what are the real world connections. Whatever it is you're teaching, this tool will give you those real world connections. The text rewriter for leveled text. This one blows me away, because any text that you have, you can copy and paste it into the text leveler. You tell it what level it needs to be. Maybe I taught 9th grade English, but I have a student I know is a struggling reader, and they're reading at a 6th or 7th grade level. I could copy that text into the text leveler, and it would take that text and level it down to their reading level. That way they can participate in the class. Because let's be honest, if I were reading at a 6th grade reading level in a 9th grade class, I'm not going to participate in class discussion. I'm not going to be able to participate in group work, because I'm not going to be able to understand the text. This allows those students to participate in the class because you give them the same text and they're getting the content. It's just written at a different level. The accommodation suggestions with students with disabilities. Oftentimes I would get IEPs, and again, background's not in SPED, I would not know what those accommodations meant. I feel like now with the pre-service education classes, you learn more about like scaffolding and things like this. I didn't really understand what that meant when I had something, a student was supposed to have scaffolded instructions. And so this accommodation suggestion, you can put in those accommodations and it will give you suggestions for how to do that in the classroom. The assignment scaffolder, if I have a student who needs their assignment scaffolded, it will break it down into steps. It helps with chunking assignments. Instead of it being so overwhelming, you're going to write a 2-page essay, blah, blah, blah. It's going to break it down and help them to understand how to do it step by step. Sentence starters, for those students with written expression disabilities, I don't even know how to begin to write. I would hear that from students. How do I start? Like, you're gonna write a paragraph, it's just one paragraph. Well, what do I start? What do I say? Sentence starters. So you would put in the topic and it would give you a list of sentence starters. And finally, common misconceptions. I like this one because at least I didn't, maybe you're better teachers than I am. I didn't always think about where could this lesson go wrong? Like, what are the skills or the standards, first of all, that are prerequisite to this lesson? And what misconceptions might there be? Like, where could my students get off track and I not even realize it? So it will help the teacher foresee what might be confusing in a lesson and how to address it. So all of these are tools in Magic School. Like I said, there are many more there now that you can dig into. I definitely suggest you go look at that because this will take off some of that workload and that burden of sometimes tedious work when you're rethinking and reimagining what you're doing in your classroom. Another tool is School AI. Again, this one does have a paid version, but the free version works just as well for what I'm suggesting you use it for here. Part of what we talked about is the engagement part of getting your students engaged, and different students get engaged in different ways. School AI basically builds chatbots. And what chatbots do is they take on the persona of whatever you tell them, and then they engage the student in conversation. And so if I'm a history teacher and we're learning about the Revolutionary War, you can do a chatbot to talk to General Washington. And you can focus it on what standard you're specifically working on. So I tell the chatbot who I want it to be and what I want it to talk about and what standards I'm focused on. The students get a code to log in. They log into a page. They don't have to have accounts. And so the students log in. Every conversation is going to be different because it's going to depend on what that student asks the chatbot. And then the chatbot in turn will also ask the student's question. So the student really steers the conversation. And so every student is going to have a different experience, but they're all working on the same standard. And so not just for history, think about the uses for ELA. If we read a story, it can chat to the student as a character. I was with a group of teachers and we were doing this, and they had just read The Outsiders. And so we had the chatbot be Ponyboy, and Ponyboy was talking as Ponyboy talks in the book. So he would say, "You dig?" And the kids really like that because they really feel like they're chatting with the character. Also, another use for this is you can have the chatbot be a tutor. This is really good. We talked about earlier those students who don't have somebody at home to help them. If you have this set up as a tutor, I can tell the chatbot, we're preparing for a test over mitosis. Here are the standards, because it will clarify it for the standards. Quiz my students and help them to understand this in preparation for the test. The student goes on, it'll start asking them questions. They can answer it, and if they get something wrong, it's going to gently correct them, and it can help explain them and prepare them. This would have been useful for me when, again, math not my forte, when my students were in high school, my children were in high school and doing algebra and geometry. Imagine if they came home and needed help, they weren't getting it from me, that's for sure. It would be great to have a tutor that they could work with, and this is all there and it's free for the kids. And they can do it from home. So that's what School AI is. They also have some teacher tools in there as well and some teacher assistants. There is a teacher assistant. You can actually ask, her name is Raina on School AI. You can ask her for help to create a lesson following UDL principles. And so she will help you build that. So that's School AI. Padlet, many teachers use Padlet for kind of their repository of resources. Padlet now has AI built into it, and it will also create choice boards for you. And it really does a great job. I put in a topic, I think I put in Shakespeare's Hamlet, and it created a choice board with ideas like create the costumes for this, or look up other stories that are similar. I can't remember all of it, but it adds pictures for every single one of them. So it will create choice boards. It will help with lesson plans. It's great for timelines, and it will add, you can tell it, I want to add images and videos, and it will add videos into your timeline as well. It also has the option now for creating historical maps. So you can create a map, and it will place if I said the key battles of the Civil War, it will place keys where they can click on it, and it'll pop up information for each of those things. And so when you are in Padlet, if you go in the corner, it'll say Open Magic Padlet Panel, and that's how you can create lessons from Padlet. And finally, this is Diffit. Diffit is a little bit different as an AI tool. The students do not interact with Diffit. Diffit is for teachers only, but it creates high quality instructional materials. And so it will create packets. And it always starts with a reading passage, and then it will add a summary, it will add vocabulary, it will add a section of questions, multiple choice questions, a section of short answer questions, and then there is a whole library of at least 100 instructional strategy activities. So think like a Freyer model for vocabulary, or a cause and effect chart, different kinds of strategies. So it creates that for you. You can go in and start with a topic. So I could put in the water cycle. I can add the standard, and it will create a reading passage. I can choose if I want the reading passage to be informational or if I want it to be narrative, and it will create the reading passage for the students. So once it does that, it makes this whole lesson. Then I can take that, and there's a button at the top where I can change the grade level. So maybe I made the lesson for my 6th graders, but I've got a couple of students who are reading at the 4th grade level. I can change the level, and it will change the leveling of the passage, and it will change the questions, but it looks the same. So if I'm handing this out to my class, these students get this level, and I can hand the other level out to my other students. Nobody knows they're getting anything different. It's the same content, just at a different level. And so that's what Diffit does. You can also change the activities for students. It also has translation. So if I have newcomers, I can translate that. Again, check with that student's ESL teacher. So it really has those activities and that start with gradual release. So it always has, I think every single one of them has a think, pair, share activity and then an independent activity. And so you can do that with your students. My husband actually uses Diffit all the time for sub-plans. If you've got a substitute coming, because those lessons are long enough that they'll take up your class time for the substitute, and it's something that they can do with them. But it will take every lesson and regenerate it at different grade levels or different languages as well. So that is all of the options for using AI. And if I were doing this with my teachers in Rutherford County, I have a choice board and I give them time to explore on their own at this point. You can access my choice board at that URL there. If you want to learn more, it has different options for you there to dig into what we've talked about today. All right, thank you.
Wow, I want to be in your class because, no, actually I want to be trained by you to be a teacher. Thank you for being with us. You gave us so many practical strategies, and I'm sure that people will take these right away and begin to use them in the classroom. So Ms. Kim Singh from Rutherford County, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for being at the SPED Collaborative here in the Center for Educational Media in the College of Education at Middle Tennessee State University.